So, I think in the course you must have used an ELISA before. True? What kind of ELISA was it? Just an example. TNFL. So, what do you use in an ELISA? Very format. What kind of what do you need to get started? What's typical elements that you will use? Secondary, yeah. You picked up a secondary. Okay. So I'm going to let's put it like this. Let's find out how we can do an ELISA for measuring antibodies in this case. That's what we want to do, right? Our antigen, this makes it a bit complicated, is I don't know, normally I sketch this on a paper, but now we have to improvise with it. So imagine this was your plastic surface. No, it's not there. This was your plastic surface. Okay. What is it? For measuring in a sample, if we have here, that we want to add, what's the next thing we do? Code. With what? With antigens directly from the culture circulating? Could that work? So she proposes, which is not a bad idea, it's a decent idea, to add directly the culture supernators from the cells. You want to use a primary antibody, okay? So that would be a catching. So what should we do? Shall we coat our samples directly, or shall we use a catching?
If you want to detect an antibody, you would usually decide if you want to detect a specific antibody, then you would coat with an antigen specific for that antibody.
Yes.
To capture it. And if you would like use, like, as we want to do, a global thing.
Yeah, we want to measure at first all the human
antibodies.
antibodies.
And then a specific antigen doesn't help you, so you have to choose like an antibody that's somehow capturing all the antibodies.
So you see, all the sample is useful to coat, basically. You just have the cells, right? That you take from the, in this case, the thymus, as I mentioned, and you put them into culture, and then you think after, what else do you add there, just to start with, so you make the cells happy. Because if you leave them dry, they're not going to be medium, right? Okay. Maybe feeder cells. In this case, you don't need feeder cells. The plasma cells are happy enough just without feeder cells. They don't divide, but they will just sit there and produce antibody all the time. So, what do you know about the material that we use for an ELISA? What is it?
Plastic.
It's plastic. What type of plastic? Would any plastic do? I'll show you tomorrow in the lab. Well, it has to be a particular type of plastic. It's polystyrol. Polystyrol binds lots of proteins. The material of Eppendorf tubes, for example, which is polypropylene, hardly binds anything. So there are different type of ELISA plates as well. Some for storing protein, then it doesn't bind. Others where you want to bind protein, like polystyrol, then it binds very well. Important to know. So some plates are for crystallization, for example, where you really don't want any sticky proteins around there. So polystyrol. What will it bind if we add our antibodies?
What was the name of plastic?
Polystyrol. Poly like K-O-L-Y, and then S-T-O-F-Y-L.
Styrol.
Styrol, heb ik het verkeerd gespeeld?
Let's go on.
Piepschuim in Nederlands. Piepschuim is made of this, the foam for the plastic, the polyplastic is made of the same material.
Polystyrene.
So that binds. If you put your culture supernatant directly on the plate, what would happen? What would you bind? Human antibodies and what else?
Everything like albumin,
Right.
stuff that is in there that is protein.
Yeah.
That could bind
So,
to the protein.
in culture medium, how much albumin is there?
Depends on the buffer you have itself.
culture medium, if you buy it, does it have any albumin? No. But we added typically 10% fetal calf serum. So 10% blood, basically. And compared to a few cells in the culture, what do you think? Do they produce huge amount of protein if they're in cell culture for a couple of days? Will that be the same as in the blood? Probably not. So what you're going to, if you apply to this plate in the bottom, just a cell culture supernatant, the only thing you're going to bind, or 99.99%, is going to be albumin, which is essentially blocking the plates. You will find very little human IgG. So you need to find another solution. You could do the experiment, you will find a little, but would be very, very insensitive. So we had the idea of the catching, right? So what does a catching antibody do? It's specific for? Yeah?
IgG?
Yeah, that's true. In this case, huh?
Yeah.
Normally a catching would be against your antigen. In our case, our antigen is IgG. So basically we would use something that would normally be called a secondary antibody. Okay. So I'm going to draw a catching antibody. Oh, where am I? Yeah. Very clumsy with this. Sorry about that. So this is the FC. I'm going to not paint all the heavy and light chains, but you can easily follow this. Is it specifically always going to sit on the plate like this? Lots of it is going to sit completely wrong like this, right? So we're going to lose some of it. How do you compensate for that?
You don't have to keep pointing at the black thing. You can just continue
Somebody
growing.
behind? Where?
You can just continue growing.
You would have to choose black all the time.
No, I didn't. I didn't. I did?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So lots of it is going to bind like the wrong way. Is that a problem? Can we prevent it? Also not. We just need to use a little more. So the signal that we are going to find is going to be a function of how much protein we are going to be able to coat. The more the better. Okay. Next step. You know something about ELISAs already. So what do we need to do next? We choose a different color.
Secondary. Add a secondary.
And a secondary.
The antigen.
Or not.
Ah, the antigen.
First
Okay.
you want to block the surface, so you have not a specific binding.
Okay. That's good. We're going to block the surface. How are we going to block the surface? With what? Yeah. Now that's going to help us. So this is, do we have text here? No, I don't have text. So this is BSA. We have to write it down. The red is BSA. Now it's good, right? The BSA would have been in the fetal bovine serum in the culture medium. Now we add it beforehand. What is cheaper than BSA? Because that's kind of, this is animal products.
Milk.
Milk.
Milk powder, yeah. Non-fat dry milk. You can use the one of Riesefla if you want. If you want to do it with a reproducible, standardized protocol, you just order it from Sigma or another company. Slightly more expensive, but not even that. Okay. Next, you already said it. Get a different color. Da-da-da-da. Was our sample, right? In this case, the green would be the human antibody, right? Okay. What's next?
I bet the human antibody would not bind this way.
Why not?
I don't know. Maybe we would make the black antibody the way that it would bind to the FC region.
You want to?
Because if we want to detect IgG, then we would make it.
You think it only binds like this? Or it
well,
should?
I guess because the arms that are sticking up,
Yeah.
we want to make them specific for the FC region, which is specific for IgG. IgGs have a certain FC region.
Yeah, this is true.
And we want to try to only like catch these, and that's the long part. Like we're drawing now.
You say the FC part, that's the IgG specific part of the antibody, right?
Yes.
This part, is it specific?
I bet it is not specific for the IgG.
This part is the same between IgM, IgA, and all the antibody isotypes. This one is a CH2 and the CH3.
Yeah.
They are isotype specific. But there's also the CH1, which is this part of the antibody, that is also isotype specific. What about the light chain? Is that isotype? Can that be isotype specific? I'm not sure how much immunology you have.
It was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, the light chain essentially doesn't switch between the isotypes. So it's either kappa light chain or lambda light chain in humans. So if you want to do an isotype specific ELISA, you cannot have one that is directed also against the light chain because it will cross-react with all the isotypes. Okay. In this case, it really depends what you want to measure. If you want to measure IgG specifically, you need to find an antibody that doesn't cross-react with light chains. You need an IgG FC specific one ideally. That's the easiest way of doing it, because when you immunize, it's kind of difficult to separate this part from this part. So typically what's used is a papain, which will cleave it here, and then you can generate the FC part separately. That's a stable protein. It's kind of difficult to produce a protein that contains all the constant domain of the IgG. So typically to gain these types of actually secondary reagents, so secondary antibodies, they use the FC part for immunization of animals. Okay, but in this case we have bound our antibody with CH2 or the CH1 in this case, so both is possible. How do we continue?
Secondary antibody with labeling.
Yeah. With what did you say?
Labeling.
Labeling. A labeled antibody. What do I choose? Blue. Okay. I put it like this. Will this work?
Yes, no.
Why? The second part is the most important. Everybody will have an opinion about anything. The most important thing in science is why do you think something is true or not. Yeah, that's what you all have to do. And how? The second is why, and then how to prove it. So, you have the idea. That's the first step. Now the argument.
Well, I guess that no other antibody will bind in this whole. We are coating it, and
Yeah.
so all the antibodies that we have that are bound actually in the end after washing are the antibodies that we are looking for, because we blocked it. So no unspecific binding is taking place. So then I guess that the second antibody, the blue one,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter which way we put it. Can we say this?
Yeah.
Because it cannot bind any other antibody, because there is no any other antibody. You can only bind the right ones.
It
So it
cannot bind to the plate, of course,
Right.
because it's blocked with PSA.
Yes.
You have to be careful that it doesn't bind here. I'm going to come to that in a moment.
Right.
It can bind, it depends on the specificity. If we immunize the animal here with a heavy and light chain, it can bind also here to the FAP part of the antibody. Are you familiar with the structure of an antibody? Okay. So you have the heavy and the light chain. In the top, so the heavy chain has the variable domain and the CH1, CH2, CH3. I'm going to give you a slide on that. I think it's important. The light chain also has a variable domain and a constant light domain as well. There's a constant epitope there. I'm going to put a slide later on the video. For detecting this antibody and this antibody, in principle, it would be good enough to have an antibody that reacts with both heavy and light chains. For instance. It would be better if you made it more specific. I'm going to explain to you. But I'm not sure that I completely understand your idea.
Alright. Well, I actually want to point. Alright. I would say it does not matter if this binds here, or if it can bind here, or here, or here, or here. Or if this is really specific for any antibody at all.
But it can bind to the primary.
It could bind to this. That's the okay. That's
and to
fine.
the other one that already is
And
bound
to that,
to that one.
So that's maybe I don't know, a distortion signal. But if you quantify the signal in the end, and you made like this one, and you control where you just have this as well, then you can just
Okay, so that's an important point. We need that control, right?
because I don't think that there will be any, let's say, yellow antibodies binding here, or binding here. So there's a problem.
I think that's completely true. Okay, so how are we going to find if the blue antibody is bound? How are we going to detect it?
Fluorescent probe.
Fluorescence, okay. Is an ELISA typically used with fluorescence?
And we also enzymes.
You need an enzyme, right? So what kind of enzyme would you typically use in an ELISA?
Reddish peroxidase.
Yeah, that's the one that we are going to use. It's also in the protocol. I think on the last page there's a list with other typically used enzymes. I'm going to represent the peroxidase simply like this. So let's imagine you can buy these antibodies already directly coupled. Sometimes they're biotinylated. Have you heard about biotinylation?
Yeah.
Okay. Imagine you had a biotin label here and here, right? And not the peroxidase. How would you get the peroxidase attached to the biotin?
Biotin, you can have molecules that bind to biotin, for example, streptavidin or avidin.
Okay.
You can just put your ARP to streptavidin or avidin.
Okay.
And then multiple of the enzymes can bind to one biotin site, so it's more site specific.
And how do you get the peroxidase bind to the biotin?
Well, if you
explain.
peroxidase, you have it via the streptavidin. You put it on a streptavidin.
Yeah, I'll show you the trick. It's actually the same trick. You can biotinylate all kind of proteins, including antibodies. And you can also biotinylate the peroxidase. Typically, that's what you do. So imagine this was the peroxidase. So, make it a square. And you would biotinylate that one as well. Because you can also biotinylate it. You can biotinylate any protein. And the nice property of streptavidin is that it forms a kind of cross. And I'm not going to be able to put it all together now to move it, but the streptavidin has 4 biotin binding sites. So the streptavidin has a property that it can cross-link the peroxidase that is biotinylated with an antibody that is biotinylated. So if you mix these 3 things together, the peroxidase with biotin, the streptavidin, and the antibody with biotin, then this will form a complex. Clear? Sometimes it's also called to ABC antibody biotin complex. So sometimes you can find. Actually, that's the way these either you buy this complex all together already, or you buy it you get it with biotin. I think there's also other ways of chemically cross-linking the peroxidase with the antibody. So you can buy it in that way. Okay, but we had the important issue that we were afraid that the blue one is binding directly to the black one. So how can we reduce this possibility? There are a couple of ways. So I'll give you a hint, otherwise you don't get me. So from which source do you get this antibody?
From mouse or goat.
So yeah, mouse from mouse. So goat anti-human. Why is mouse anti-human a very rare antibody to use in such an experiment?
But they're probably very alike.
No, they're not. That's not the reason. They're not actually goat and mouse equally dissimilar.
Kleiner concentraat, lower
Where
concentration.
the question was, what is going to be the source of your antibody?
You need a lot of it, so you have to use 100 mouses or one goat.
Exactly, that's the point. Yes, mouse is too small to get enough antibody out. And what we use here are typically polyclonal antibodies. And these polyclonal antibodies actually have the properties that they will bind different epitopes. There, or there, the way that I've been drawing it. So imagine this is a goat, and this is human. Should we take, what species or what material should we take for the secondary at the top? Goat idea, yeah. Why also goat?
Because if it's also goat, it wouldn't then become its own antibody.
Right, because that would be kind of an autoimmune disease, yeah, would give immune complexes. Problem with that solves most of the problem. Not 100%, because typically this is one goat, typically that is another one, and they have different allotypes, so they don't have the same immunoglobulins exactly, so they still might cross-react to some extent. I've seen that happening. So how can we reduce this possibility?
Blocking before adding the second one?
Blocking before, well, another blocking.
Just use a control.
You can correct for it, yeah, just not including sample and
Yeah.
measure it. Okay.
Use monoclonal antibodies.
Of not more, as a monoclone, not poly.
Using monoclonals. Why can't we use monoclonals, or is it more difficult to use monoclonal antibodies? It's possible. I'm not aware that there's any available for this monoclonal anti-human IgG, but maybe there is. What could be a limitation in this case? Actually, it should be possible. You could use 2 monoclonals if you had enough of it.
Yeah, but too expensive probably.
Yeah. You see, monoclonals always bind to exactly the same epitope, right? So if there's this epitope binding this antibody, it's the secondary, in this case, would have to bind exactly the same epitope. Well, with antibodies, it's possible because they have 2 identical sequences. Right? They have 2 heavy chains and 2 light chains, so it's possible. But with any other antibody, wouldn't be, or with any other antigen, wouldn't be possible. Unless it was a multimer of the same protein. One other trick is to generate antibodies, like you say, that are Fc specific. So this one should be Fc specific and this one too. So at least you avoid that this one binds to the FAP region, and you avoid that this one binds to the FAP region of that. Another thing to take it one step further is what you can do. You can design for the binding. So I should have left a little bit of space. For the binding, you don't need the whole antibody. So what we use very often is only the FAP fragments, the FAP2 fragments of antibodies. Because in that way, we avoid that the secondary up there recognizes the Fc part. So that's the trick. And even for the secondary, we don't need the whole antibody as well. You can also work with FAP fragments there. So FAP fragments are generated by digestion of the antibody, and then you can separate the Fc part of the antibody from the binding part, FAP arms. Yeah? I think in your protocol you will see the FAP also being used as a catalyst. So the reason is that the secondary antibody up there, the blue one, will be Fc specific, and the only Fc in the ELISA being present, then in this case, will be there, and not this part. This will not be there. It's only this. Another trick to be used to get rid of the background, even if you use two gold antibodies, is to include, like you say, it's a kind of blocking, to include gold serum with the secondary. Because if there are any gold antibodies that this binds to, this will already take place in solution. There will be a competition with the, let's say, if the gold antibodies that are unspecific are swimming. Stop. Not listening to me anymore? Yeah. If the gold antibodies are around, and if this one wants to bind to gold, maybe I should use black, then it will do this in solution. You follow? If this one has a tendency to bind to the black antibody, by using a lot of black antibodies in solution, you will prevent that this one sticks to the surface. It will do the binding in solution already and get washed away. So in some ELISAs you will find big question mark.
Yeah.
I'll explain.
Because if the antibodies already bind serum, then what antibodies will bind to the
High specific.
antigen?
Only the very specific ones. Only the human specific antibodies, not the cross-reacting ones.
So we add a lot.
You would have to add a lot of goat serum in this case, which is a source, a big source of unspecific antibodies. So if you had, for example, from this animal before immunization, the serum that was without anti-human antibodies, to block an unspecific binding, you can add these black antibodies, but unspecific, to the ELISA out there. So that's why in a lot of ELISAs you will find secondary with a low percentage, for example 1% of serum of the same species. Yeah. So these are all ways to control background. Okay. Now imagine you had antibodies in there. Okay, then after all you get the enzyme bound there. How do you get then a signal? How can we measure something?
And the substrate for HSP,
Yeah.
which is
TMB, for example. It's in the TMB, for example. It's in the blood. And that makes a colorless substrate into a colored product using the enzyme. Now do we measure it?
first you stop the reaction,
Yeah.
then you can measure it with a spectroscopy or a plate reaction.
Okay. And how do we then know how much sample was in there?
Calibration.
Ah, okay. It's good. Let's say the calibration curve looked, this from the last year, looked like this. This is a typical calibration curve. You see it here? Starts at the maximum of the 1 and goes down to this level. Why doesn't it go down to 0 in this case? You see, here's the optical density, and here's the IgG concentration. Here, should make this higher or bigger? Like this. So this is how this typical exam could look like.
The medium has an absorption too.
Now the medium is gone. The medium is all washed away except for the antibodies. But what gives some absorption?
Plate itself.
Hmm?
Plate itself.
The plate itself. Actually, that's what happened here. And you might have some background from the unspecific binding that we just discussed. Maybe you don't get rid of it completely. So maybe the secondary binds a bit to the surface. Okay. So why doesn't this go up like this? Why does it stop at some level? Because I think you normally use the calibration curve should go from your perspective straight up, right? Ideally it starts at 0 and goes indefinitely, no matter how high you want it. So why does it never get above 1.2? It's saturated. Yeah. Something is going to saturate it in any case. Yeah. Even human population growth is going to saturate it at some point. It's not going to grow indefinitely. You can add the double amount of substrate. In this case, probably the signal goes double, but it will be saturating in any case at some level. So, let's say we have our sample at 1 gram per liter. Is that going to, can we use that directly for calculating the concentration? We add one well or sample and then we want to measure the concentration.
It would not be that good because like your calibration curve is very flat, so you don't see a lot of the difference.
Yeah, 1 is not even different from 0.01, right? It's too shallow here. So we can't. Okay, well, I make it easy then. We assume a concentration of 1 gram per liter and then we just dilute it 100 times. So we're here somewhere in this area. Is that fine? Only one sample?
Because you would see the slightest difference between those. You would go straight down, just from
Too much. From here
to there.
to there. Okay, but that's possible. Yeah, you're right. So, but I said 100. So then it would be here. It would be in this range. That would be good. Why is it not a good idea to only use one concentration anyway, or one dilution?
If you make 1 arrow, it will get into everything.
Okay, we do use a Duplo. Yeah. So we use 2 or 3. Of we dilute. We take 3 samples and we dilute them all 1 to 100 to get in this range. But I made an assumption. That's why it's not going to work in this case. What was the assumption? I said the concentration was 1 gram per liter. Do we know that in advance? We have no idea, right? These cells that we put in culture could do anything. So how are we going to solve that? We don't know the concentration of our sample, and we need the concentration of our sample to know where we get a linear signal. So what do we do?
Calibration with known samples. You make
Okay.
a calibration line with samples you know the concentration of.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say this actually was a standard. We used 2 standards in this case. Another group or a Duplo gave us this. Okay. So we know this is going to be our signal. But what about our sample? Because we don't know how much antibodies our cell line produce. We assume it might be around 1 gram per liter, but it might be also factor 10 less.
Then make the solution. And then compare it to the calibration curve.
So you're going to take one concentration, you measure it, it's too high, then you do next day another experiment to see if maybe you should dilute it factor 10. Is that a good idea? I think it's a good idea. But who disagrees?
You can also just use it as a dilution series of your sample.
That's a solution. Yes. You don't only use one concentration for your sample, you use also, as well as for your standard, also a dilution curve for your sample. That's the trick. You dilute it, for example, not at all, maybe this level. And what you're going to get then is a second curve. It's not in here, okay, because I already fitted. You get a curve, the second curve, with unknown concentration of your sample. In this case, we did also a lot of different dilutions. We just started at a high level. And what we then did with using an Excel and the data fitter is we just assumed the concentration, then calculated how far it is away from, in all the points from the standard curve, and then improved this prediction by adjusting the concentration that we assumed. And in the end, we got a very nice fit between the two. And that told us that this was the real concentration. You follow that?
No.
Okay, I thought so. Not a bad explanation. So. So, image. Starting a line. Doesn't it? Yeah. I didn't choose a line. So, image, this was the standard on freehand, where is that? Oh dear. Oh, still not freehand.
On the pencil.
Thank you. So background, signal, saturation, right? Okay.
More or less.
More or less, thanks. These are non-concentration of the standard, huh? Let's see. So, second one, different color, different axis. So, this
If a Y sign is going to be an artist.
you ever try to paint with a mouse? Okay, let's say this is undiluted. This is 1-to-1. This represents a 1. This is undiluted. That's the reason why we can't use undiluted sample, because it gives it too high signal. Let's say this is 1-to-100 dilution. That's why we can't use 1-to-100, because that's too diluted. We need to use 1-in-10 or something. So then you can put this superimpose this curve on that one. And assuming that you have here 1 gram per liter and here 1 gram per liter of sample, they should match completely, right? If this is 1 gram per liter, undiluted, your standard undiluted, say 1 gram per liter, and this happened to be in your sample exactly the same, then these two curves should be identical, right? You start with the standard sample, you know, 1 gram per liter, you make a dilution curve. That gives you that signal. Your sample you don't know, but it gives you the same dilutions, exactly the same values. It should give you exactly the same curve. If it's a factor 10 diluted, the curve will drop down much faster. And you can use those values in Excel, I'll put it on a link, to calculate the difference in concentration between your standard and your sample. A little bit abstract.
So the amount of shift.
Yeah, shift, you can say.
The Helling, I would say, the difference in slope.
The slope, yeah. And the slope
is
actually,
your difference in dilution.
no, the slope is actually always the same. If you dilute a factor 2, the OD will drop its
The
factor 2.
saturation is probably lower than if 1 is the maximum. When it's 1, you got maximum saturation. If your sample is diluted,
Yeah.
your maximum will be lower. Probably.
No, if the sample is diluted and it's maybe I should explain is that what I used here in this graph in here is a logarithmic scale, because if you use here in this graph, and that's maybe a trick scale for this one, then it looks like this. You see? And then if I use here a very small scale of that, 0.01, then you see that the linear range of this ELISA is very, very narrow, right? That's why we use a logarithm, that we at least cover all of it. And when you use a logarithmic concentration, and then we cannot, of course, use 0. Ignore that. I put it away already. Okay. So, what the sample, both the sample and the standard will saturate at exactly the same level, because that's not defined by the sample itself, but by the amount of regions that we've added, by the catching, by the secondary, by the substrate. So they will saturate at exactly the same level. The background, if there's no sample and no standard, is also the same. They only differ in when they drop down. So what I want you to do this afternoon, until we meet again, is to define an ELISA plate in which you have 8 by 12 positions, normally in a typical ELISA plate. So it's going from A to H and from 1 to 12. You can use half of the plate, and I want you to calculate or to design it in such a way that you can measure the concentration of 2 samples. And I want you to do that in subgroups, because that's why this was important. Because apart from the when we meet, which is defined by group 1 and by group 2, we've also defined here subgroups, 1 to 3 for group 1 and 1 to 3 for group 2. So in total 6 groups. So in these groups, I want you to make a layout for the ELISA plate to measure the concentration of 2 samples. And that's what we're going to do tomorrow. And to make sure that this is going right, we'll meet again this afternoon to see if you're going the right way.
What's the purpose of the setup discussion later on?
That's the purpose.
That's up.
Yeah. So tomorrow morning, when you go to the lab, and you get your 2 samples and the tube with a standard concentration of 1 gram per liter, for example, or not for example, I'll make it 1 gram per liter, so you will be able to find out what the concentration of your sample is. Okay? Knowing that you cannot only use one concentration for your standard, and you can also not use one single concentration for your sample, but making a dilution curve. And I'm also
You have half the plate.
Pardon?
Using half the plate.
Half the plate, yes. Otherwise, it gets too much work. And using too many reagents. So each get a plate, but we only coat half of the plate. That should be enough.
You want the new clothes or?
Now that's up to you.
If you have enough room.
And think of the controls, right? That's
You also
important.
need to
Controls meaning
the
either no
calibration.
sample. Maybe there's something with your setup because you needed to change it from rat to human, right? So you need to control for those things as well when you do it the first time. I know that it works, but
But in there, do we have to put 2 samples and also the standard, or is the standard already?
would you like the standard to be on a plate of somebody else? Or would you like it on your own plate?
So standard, oral, and twisted.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have 6 parallel groups tomorrow in the practical. Unfortunately, so many, but I'll divide you and we'll run